Hello, night owls. I am Dusky Nights, and I bring you real-life horror stories that will help you sleep, or maybe keep you awake. But before we start, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Also, do not forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel.
Ever get that creepy feeling like someone's watching you when nobody's around? Or have you ever felt something weird, maybe even ghostly, nearby? Like the air feels heavy, and every shadow seems to be hiding something scary. If you've felt this way before, then these stories will really freak you out. Pay close attention, because what you're about to hear might make you question everything. I had heard about it before on various forums, even joked about it with my wife. The whole idea of phantom crawling or skin crawling sensations. Most people brushed it off as just the body reacting to its own internal sensations. You know, like when you feel something on your skin but look and there's nothing there. Some people even say it's just the mind playing tricks, a simple glitch in the system. But this was no glitch. This wasn't just something I could laugh off or tell myself was normal. It felt real, and it wasn't going away. It started one night, late after work. My body was heavy, exhausted from the grind of a long, stressful day. I had barely managed to pull myself into bed and settle under the blankets when I felt it, a small, distinct feeling, like something crawling on my left little finger. I couldn't even tell what it was. Was it a bug? A hair? Maybe just a piece of dust? But no matter what I told myself, I couldn't shake the sensation. I rubbed my hand against the bedsheet, brushed it off with my other hand, and tried to ignore it, but it wouldn't go away. I sat up, turned on the light, and held my hand under the bulb. There was nothing there. I stared at my little finger, watching it intently, trying to make sense of the sensation. But still, there was no visible bug, no piece of debris or hair. It was as if something invisible was crawling, not just across the skin, but inside the skin. Slowly, cautiously, I brought my other hand to my finger, trying to feel the strange crawling. But the moment I touched it, it stopped. I couldn't feel it anymore. Confused, I lay back down, trying to convince myself I was just tired. Maybe it was nothing more than the sensation of being half asleep. Maybe it was a weird trick my body was playing on me. I tried to push it from my mind to go back to sleep, but that was the first mistake. I couldn't sleep. The feeling came back, not just on my finger, but on my entire hand. Then it spread to my arm, up to my shoulder, down to my torso, my legs. I felt it everywhere. My entire body seemed alive with it. Every inch of my skin itching and crawling with invisible things I couldn't see. It was like I had become a human-sized host for insects, each one crawling across me in slow, relentless movements. I tried to shake it off, tried to convince myself that it was all in my head, but the sensation was so intense, so vivid, I couldn't ignore it. I turned to my wife, shaking her awake. "Do you feel that?" I asked, my voice trembling. "It's like something's crawling all over me." She groggily stirred, rubbing her eyes. "It's nothing. You're just imagining it," she muttered, before turning over and pulling the covers tighter around herself. I didn't argue. She was right. I was probably just imagining things. But when I closed my eyes again, I could feel it, crawling all over my body, as real as the sheets against my skin. I couldn't escape it. The next day, I told myself it would go away. It didn't. I went to work, and the sensation stayed with me. Every time I tried to focus on something, it crept up my neck, my arms, my legs. It was there, crawling just out of sight, making my skin itch, making my thoughts scatter. I couldn't explain it, and I couldn't stop it. I couldn't focus on anything for too long, because the crawling, the feeling, it always returned. By the end of the day, I was barely holding it together. That night, I couldn't take it anymore. It wasn't just an annoyance anymore. It was torture. The crawling wasn't stopping. It was constant, gnawing at my sanity. I called my brother. He had studied medicine for a time, and even though he wasn't a doctor, he knew more than I did. "It's just your body," he said. "It happens. You've probably just been overworked. You're not sleeping well, and your body is reacting to it. It's nothing to worry about." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But I couldn't ignore the feeling, so I did what I thought would give me some peace. I cut off my finger. I know, it sounds insane, but at that moment, it made perfect sense. It was just a finger. I work in construction, and I've had worse injuries before. I figured that if I could just cut it off, whatever it was that was causing the crawling would stop. I could deal with the pain. I could deal with the loss of a finger. I just needed it to end, and it did. For a brief moment, it did. But the next day, the crawling came back, not on the finger that I'd severed, but on the other hand. Then, it spread to both arms, both legs. No matter what I cut off, no matter how much I bled, it wouldn't stop. It wasn't just physical anymore. It was a constant presence, something that seemed to wrap itself around my body, inside me, under my skin. It never stopped. It moved to my neck. My wife, terrified and crying, begged me to get help. She begged me to stop. She didn't understand. She couldn't. No one could. It didn't matter how many times I tried to explain it. The crawling, the sensation of something alive on me. It couldn't be stopped. I tried to tell her it wasn't real, that I couldn't stop it. But she didn't understand. She couldn't. I had to do something to make it stop. I couldn't live with it anymore. I took the knife, feeling its cold metal against my fingers. I had to stop it. I brought the blade to my throat, convinced that if I ended it all, the crawling would stop. The pressure in my chest built up, the sensation of something inside me fighting for air, for life, gnawing at me, pulling at my mind. It felt like I was suffocating. But then, just as I was about to make the cut, I froze. It wasn't stopping. Nothing would stop it. I could feel it crawling again, up my neck, down my arms, across my legs. I could feel it everywhere, inside and outside of me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't stop it. I thought of my wife's pleading face, her hands gripping my arm, nothing mattered. It never would. I put the knife down. I couldn't do it. But I knew that the crawling would never stop. I've never been the type of person to believe in paranormal stuff. You know, all the things people talk about that send chills down your spine, ghosts, demons, or anything else that can't be explained. I always thought they were just stories, or something people made up for attention, or to freak others out. But now, after what happened with my best friend Jason, I'm starting to wonder if I was wrong. I still can't shake the feeling that something happened to him last night, and I can't stop thinking that it's not really Jason anymore. It started off like any other night. Jason stayed over at my place after school. We spent hours gaming together, like we usually do. We've been best friends since middle school, and those late-night gaming sessions have always been our thing. We were playing this new game that we had been dying to try, laughing at stupid jokes, and just messing around like usual. We played until about 3 a.m., and I could feel myself getting really tired. At some point, I must have passed out mid-game because I woke up in bed the next morning, my headphones still on, the game paused, and the room dark. Jason wasn't there anymore. I figured he'd just left, maybe to head home early or something, and I didn't think much of it. I just figured I'd see him later at school, but then things started getting weird. I saw Jason at school the next day, and while it looked like him, sounded like him, something about him wasn't quite right. At first, I didn't pay it any mind. You know how sometimes you have one of those mornings where everything just feels a little off? It was like that. He seemed fine at first, just like usual. But as the day went on, things started to feel strange. Like when you look at a picture of something and everything in it seems perfect, but there's just one tiny thing that feels out of place. That's how it felt with Jason. We've been best friends for years. I know him inside and out. I can tell when something's wrong just by the way he talks, moves, or reacts. But today, he was acting different. The first thing I noticed was the way he was talking. Jason is one of those guys who has a laid-back, casual tone. He never uses big words or anything too serious. He jokes around a lot, and that's part of what makes him Jason. But today, he sounded off. He used words he'd never use. For example, when we were talking about our math teacher, he called her Professor, which no one does that. We always joke that she reminds us of someone's grandmother. But when I made that joke, Jason just kind of stared at me. It was like he didn't understand what I was saying, or he didn't get the joke. It wasn't a huge thing, just a small detail, but it stuck with me. Something about it felt wrong. Jason wasn't the type to act confused about something so simple. He had always been the more quick-witted one of us, always ready with a joke or a sarcastic comment. Then we went to gym class, and that's when things really started to spiral. Jason's always been terrible at running. We used to joke that he ran like a baby giraffe, awkward, all long limbs and clumsy. But today, when we lined up for a race, something changed. He was fast. Not just fast, but almost effortlessly fast. It was like someone had swapped him out with a completely different person. He sprinted across the gym like it was nothing. And the worst part, he wasn't even out of breath. Jason had always struggled with running, but today he made it look easy, like he'd been training for it for months. I couldn't stop staring at him. Something wasn't right, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the Jason I knew had somehow changed. Then came the worst part, his eyes. I've known Jason's eyes for years. He's always had green eyes. We used to joke about it when we were kids, how he hated them because he wanted blue eyes like his dad's. But now, his eyes were blue, completely blue, and I swear there's no way I could be wrong about that. I know Jason's eyes better than I know my own. But when I looked into his eyes today, they were different. They weren't his anymore. I asked him, "Bro, are you wearing contacts or something?" He stopped, just for a second. He paused too long, like he didn't understand the question. Then he laughed, but it wasn't his laugh. It was forced, off. It was like someone trying to mimic his laugh, but getting it wrong. Jason's laugh has always been genuine, spontaneous, but this one sounded like it was being practiced. Then he patted me on the shoulder. Jason never pats me on the shoulder. He's not the touchy-feely type. "Don't be weird, dude," he said, and that was it. I didn't know what to do with that. Everything about him felt wrong. Something was off, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. But I tried. I told myself it was just me overthinking. Maybe I was just tired or imagining things. At lunch, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old pictures of Jason. Every single one of them showed him with green eyes. Even when we were kids, there was no mistaking it. He'd always had green eyes, but now, today, his eyes were blue. How could that happen? Panic started to set in. I had to know. I texted his mom. It was a joke at first. "Ha ha ha. Jason finally got those blue contacts, huh?" Her reply came fast and my heart sank when I saw it. "What? Jason's always had blue eyes." I felt like I was going to pass out. For the rest of the day, Jason kept watching me. Not in a casual way, like we always do when we glance at each other during class. No, this was different. Every time I looked over, I'd catch him staring at me, and then he'd turn his head just a little too late, like he wanted me to notice, like he was trying to make sure I knew he was watching me. It was unsettling, and the more I thought about it, the more I started to freak out. It wasn't just that he looked different. It was like he was acting different too. His whole demeanor felt off, like he wasn't my best friend anymore. At the end of the school day, he caught me at my locker. "You okay?" he asked, his voice the same, but still something was wrong. It sounded fine, but it didn't feel like him. I nodded, but my hands were shaking. I could feel him noticing, his eyes flicking to my hands, then back to my face. He didn't say anything. Instead, he just smiled, but it wasn't a normal smile. It was wide, too slow. It was like he was trying to figure out how to smile. It was unnatural, forced. "I'll see you later," he said, his words stretching just a bit longer than usual. And then he stood there, watching me as I walked away. He didn't follow. He just stood there, staring, waiting. I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's going on with Jason, but I'm terrified. Because whatever it is, I don't think it's him anymore. And I think it knows I know. I never believed in ghosts or legends. Not really. Growing up in Denver, the idea of anything supernatural never seemed real to me. It was always something people spoke of to frighten each other, or maybe to entertain themselves on a dark, stormy night. But all that changed the day I went with my girlfriend Leah to her hometown of Columbia Center in the Mohawk Valley. I didn't know it then, but that trip would change my life forever, leaving me with more questions than answers. Leah invited me to film a documentary on the local legends, a project I was eager to dive into. I had heard about this one particular legend, the one they called the Preacherman. Locals spoke of a creature in the woods that could trick you into hearing sermons late at night. They say, if you hear the preaching, you're supposed to ignore it. Don't respond. Don't even look. I didn't take it seriously at first. I thought it was just one of those stories people tell to keep kids from wandering off into the woods late at night. But when I heard the story from Leah's Uncle Danny, and then experienced things firsthand, I learned how foolish I had been to dismiss it. We arrived in Columbia Center in the early afternoon, passing through an area that looked like it hadn't changed in centuries. The town wasn't much of a center at all. It was just a scattered collection of old colonial homes surrounded by thick, dark woods. It felt like time had stopped here, the sort of place where nothing changed, where nothing was urgent except for the whisper of old secrets hiding in the trees. As we drove through the outskirts of town, I noticed a sign on the side of the road. It read, "Deaf Child Area," and underneath it were two boys, maybe 11 or 12, with an old, beaten-up sign standing beside them. One of the boys had a large, bald head and was shaped like a toad. He wore dirty tan shorts and had legs like tree trunks. The other boy, a little taller, and with a pair of thick Coke bottle glasses, had a black bowl cut. He wore a sleeveless shirt with Andy written in block letters on the front. When they saw us, they both flipped us off. The boys were locals, obviously. Leah honked the horn, laughing, as we drove by. "Welcome to the center," she said, and I couldn't help but laugh along. This place felt like the kind of town that doesn't care about anything except the quiet and the routine. Later that evening, Leah told me about the legend of the Preacherman. She brushed it off casually, almost like it was nothing. She said it was just a story, something people tell to scare kids from going into the woods when they shouldn't. But I could tell there was more to it. It wasn't just folklore to her. There was a certain gravity in the way she spoke about it. The legend goes like this: if you hear preaching in the woods, don't respond. Don't respond. If you hear preaching in the woods, it's not for you. It's for the roots. If you hear preaching late at night, don't look left and don't look right. If you answer, even once, the preacher man will eat you up. The warning was passed down through the generations. According to Leah, it was a rhyme that kept kids from sneaking off into the woods at night. But Leah wasn't joking when she mentioned the preacherman, and neither was Uncle Danny, even though he'd been drinking. That night, Leah's Uncle Danny, who was pretty drunk, pulled me aside and spoke in a voice far too serious for his state of inebriation. He leaned in close, his bloodshot eyes wide and shaking slightly. "If you hear preaching in the woods," he slurred, "don't look. Don't respond. It's not for you. You answer back, you might end up like them kids in the 70s. Before he could finish his story, Leah's mom kicked him out, telling him to go get some rest, but his words stuck with me. The next morning, I packed my gear, my Sony shotgun mic, a field recorder, and a GoPro strapped to my chest. Leah's 12-year-old brother Matt came with us. He was an eager, fearless boy with a sharp mind, and I could tell right away that he'd spent a lot of time in the woods. He was a Boy Scout, after all. We packed the essentials: food, water, sleeping bags, a tent, and headed out. Matt led the way through thick moss-covered trails, past ancient rock formations and crumbling hunting stands. I couldn't help but marvel at the beauty of the landscape, at how untouched everything seemed. The trees here were ancient, old. They had witnessed countless generations come and go, and I began to feel a strange sense of unease, as if these woods held stories that had yet to be told. After walking for hours, we stumbled upon a small clearing at sunset and set up camp. The air had turned colder, and the stillness was unnerving. I was gathering firewood when I heard something snap behind me. I froze. My heart began to pound as I turned, shining my flashlight into the trees. Nothing. Just the wind, or so I thought. I brushed it off and returned to the fire, trying to shake the feeling that something was watching me. We roasted hot dogs and shared a bag of cheese doodles. I fiddled with my audio gear, waiting for any sign of the preachermen, but the woods stayed quiet, or at least I thought they were. Then, snap, louder this time. Matt jumped to his feet, flashlight in hand. "Come on, you fuckers, I know it's you." Leah and I followed him into the woods, and just as we rounded a bend, two figures darted from behind a tree. We barely had time to react before Matt tripped, knocking me to the ground. His flashlight caught the figures. It was Andy and the spray paint kid, the two troublemakers from earlier. I couldn't stop laughing. They looked ridiculous, like they belonged to some strange new species of freaks. Leah joined in, her laugh infectious. "Well, you guys finally made it to the party," I said between giggles, inviting them back to the campfire. But Matt wasn't as amused. "If Cookie does one fucked up thing, you're both gone," Matt warned, his eyes narrowing as he looked at Andy. Andy just nodded, his wide eyes betraying a hint of fear. "Don't get your panties in a wad," he muttered under his breath. Cookie, the quieter one, didn't say anything. He just devoured 2 hot dogs in seconds, his eyes wide and unblinking. "He can't hear you," Andy explained. "Cookie's deaf. He's been that way since birth." I was curious about the legend and decided to joke about it. "You guys ever hear the story of the preacher man?" Nobody laughed. In fact, Cookie's whole body tensed at the mention of the name. His eyes darted from me to the woods behind the fire. I pressed on, nudging him, trying to get a response. "Did I scare you when I mentioned the preacherman?" I asked. "No," Cookie finally answered, his voice deep and unnatural, a low baritone that made my skin crawl. It was the first and only thing he said that night. Matt, sensing the tension, quickly changed the subject. He told me the full story of the preacherman, how he would whisper sermons into the ears of children, wicked children, and how they would disappear, never to be seen again. The preacherman was a boogeyman, a creature of folklore that was meant to keep kids from wandering into the woods at night. But the real story, the one Leah, Andy, and Matt told me, was darker. Back in the 1970s, 9 children born into old founding families, were taken into the woods by their own parents and left to die as offerings to the preachermen. These children were considered imperfect, and the families saw them as a burden. After the children disappeared, the parents went mad, some taking their own lives. Andy's dad was one of those children. He was one of the lucky ones, unlike his brother Robert, who never came back. After hearing the story, I tried to lighten the mood by playing back the day's field audio, but the results were anything but comforting. Static, wind, crows. Then, beneath it, a voice. It wasn't speaking, it was preaching. Slow, rhythmic, almost like scripture. The voice was foreign, incomprehensible, but unmistakable. It sent chills down my spine. I could feel the hair on the back of my neck stand up. This wasn't just some interference. This was something real. Leah made me turn it off, but I could tell that even she was disturbed. Something in that voice wasn't right. After Andy and Cookie left, the night seemed to drag on in a slow, suffocating silence. None of us slept well. It felt like we were all waiting for something to happen, but I didn't know what. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise and decided to listen to the audio again, alone this time. I looped it, slowed it down, sped it up. The more I listened, the colder I felt. The voice, the preaching, it sounded like something ancient, something not meant for human ears. Matt and Leah woke up feeling sick. Matt threw up into the ashes of the fire, and Leah looked pale, like she had seen something she shouldn't have. We packed up quickly, feeling an unease we couldn't shake. Back at the house, everything seemed normal at first, but after dinner, I made the mistake of playing the audio for Leah's family. Uncle Danny ran out of the house in a panic, terror in his eyes. He slammed the door behind him. Leah screamed, waking up in a frenzy. I rushed to her room, and as I tried to calm her down, her father became agitated, struggling to figure out how to turn off the audio. Her mother begged me to stop, but I couldn't. I didn't want to believe what I was hearing, but the voice, it was like it was calling to me. Leah locked herself in the bathroom, throwing up for hours. Later, she asked me to delete the recording, but I couldn't. I didn't want to, not yet. I wasn't ready to let go of what I had discovered. That night I fell asleep on the couch, exhausted. But I woke up to the sound of Leah's mom making coffee in the kitchen. She looked shaken, haunted by a dream she couldn't explain. I dreamed of roots growing through my spine, of crying sap, she told me, her hands trembling as she gripped the coffee mug. Then Leah's father screamed from the other room. I ran to find him holding Matt. Matt was alive, but blood poured from his ears. A pencil had been jammed into his skull. And Matt was whispering over and over again, "I can talk to the trees now." They rushed him to the hospital. When I went to Leah's room, she was gone. No note, no message, just muddy prints on the floor and a smear of dirt on her wall. That's when I made the mistake of going back into the woods. The trees felt different. The air was colder, too still. As I walked deeper into the forest, I heard it again. The preacher man's voice. My gear spiked, then died, leaving me in complete silence. I pressed forward, calling Leah's name. Then I saw them. Trees. Or maybe they were people. They were fused into the trunks, their faces twisted into grotesque masks of bark. And then I saw him. Preacher man. Spindly, towering, with skin like burlap stretched over bones. No eyes, just a knot of bark where his face should be. His mouth split sideways, impossibly wide. "The roots are thirsty," he said in my mind, his voice echoing through my skull. And that's when I realized he wasn't preaching to us. He was feeding the forest. The trees bent inward like teeth, their bark splitting. Arms, made of thick, wet wood, reached out, grabbing Andy by the skull and pulling him into the ground, the trunk sealing over him as though he had never existed. I tried to run, but I couldn't move. I felt hands, wet and sticky, around my throat. The sermon vibrated in my spine, urging me to surrender. I saw Leah, her mouth sewn shut with pine needles, twitching beneath the roots. Alive, but trapped. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. Then pain. Sharp, wet, cold. Cookie, wild-eyed, barefoot, stabbed a stick into my ear. Then the other. Blood poured from my ears, and I passed out, screaming a scream I couldn't hear. When I woke up, I was deaf. Cookie never hears the sermons. He saved me, but now the trees are growing closer to town, closer to the center. Leah's still missing, but I know the truth. Her family won't talk to me. Matt is. I can only imagine. And at night, I still feel the cadence of that voice in my chest, in my bones. The preacher man, he's still out there. If you hear preaching in the woods, don't look, don't respond. The trees are always listening, and the preacher man is hungry. I had promised myself I'd never go back there. The house had been a forgotten memory, gathering dust at the end of an old winding road. It had stood silent for years, its walls bearing the scars of a past I had been running from, a past I didn't want to face again. Since that night, it had remained abandoned. I kept telling myself that I would never step foot inside it again, and for years I hadn't. But time has a strange way of fading the edges of pain, and with time, even the most painful memories begin to blur, losing their sharpness. The house, though, had been a constant, a place of ghosts and whispers I thought I had left behind, but the day came when the real estate agent called. "Someone's interested in buying it," she said, her voice flat and professional. She said the house had stood too long in disrepair. It needed repairs to make it marketable, and I was the only one left who could do it. She suggested I come back just to tidy up the place, make sure it was ready for sale. It sounded simple enough. A few repairs, a quick turnaround. The house was already decaying, a relic of a past that had long since slipped from my hands. There was nothing left here for me, I thought. Nothing but memories. So I returned. I thought it would be quick, a task to cross off my list. But the moment I touched that rusty doorknob, I knew it wouldn't be. The door swung open easily, creaking as though it had been waiting for me to return. The air inside was thick and still, heavy with the weight of time. It wasn't dusty, but it was stifling. There was something about the atmosphere inside that felt wrong, something I couldn't immediately identify. The house had changed, but not in the way I expected. It had always been dark, always felt suffocating, but now it was different. The paintings on the walls looked darker, and the silence seemed more profound, as if it were absorbing the sound, swallowing it whole. I stepped into the foyer, glancing around at the familiar space. The living room was just as I remembered it, dimly lit, the crooked couch with the squashed cushions, the worn carpet beneath my feet. It was the same, but different. The air was thick with memories, her laughter, our late-night talks, the Sundays we spent together. Every corner of the house was a ghost, a fragment of a life that no longer existed. And then there was the final memory, the fight, the last night we spent together. I remembered it like it was yesterday. The harsh words we exchanged, the bitterness that filled the room. I had said things I would never take back, and she had begged me to stay, but I left, slamming the door behind me. That was the last time I saw her, at least alive. The staircase creaked under my feet as I climbed to the second floor. My hands trembled, though I couldn't explain why. The guilt weighed heavily on my chest, and my mind swam with thoughts of what could have been if only I had stayed. The hallway felt narrower now, as if the walls were closing in on me. The air grew colder, as if I were stepping into another time, another world. The house was shifting, changing to accommodate something I couldn't understand. I passed one of the bedrooms, and out of the corner of my eye I saw a figure move, quick, faint but unmistakable, her face. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. I couldn't breathe. It couldn't be. She was gone. I was alone, but I saw it. I saw her face. My mind raced, and I told myself it was a trick of the light, an illusion. But it didn't feel like an illusion. It felt real, like something I wasn't meant to see. I stood there, frozen, staring at the door. The room beyond was empty, dark and still. But I knew what I had seen. It wasn't just my imagination. It was a warning, a sign. I stepped into the room, and there was nothing. The bed was undisturbed, the air cold. There were no signs of life, no movement, just the silence. But her scent lingered, faint but unmistakable. It wasn't perfume. It was something else, something familiar, something that belonged to her. It was the kind of scent you would smell after someone left the room, the remnants of their presence hanging in the air, like they hadn't truly left yet. I sat down on the bed, my mind racing. What was happening? Was this regret? Was it guilt? Or something more? That night, our last night together, had been full of anger and harsh words. She had cried, begged me to stay, but I left. I couldn't stop thinking about it. The image of her crying as I slammed the door behind me replayed in my mind over and over again. I stayed in the room for what felt like hours, though I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her shadow in the hallway, flickering at the edge of my vision. I wasn't sure if it was real or if I was just imagining it, but it didn't matter. She was there. I could feel her presence. The next morning, I went downstairs to make some coffee, trying to shake off the feeling that something wasn't right. That's when I saw it, a cup on the table. It was the same cup she used to drink from every morning, the same cup I had seen 1,000 times before. It was there, sitting on the table, clean and undisturbed. There was no dust on it, no signs that it had been untouched for years. It was as if she had just placed it there moments before. I froze. That wasn't possible. There was no way it could be there. I had been alone in this house for years. How could it be there, just waiting for me to see it? I tried to leave, but I couldn't. The doors wouldn't open. The windows wouldn't budge. It was as if the house had locked itself from the inside. I couldn't make sense of it. My phone had no signal as soon as I stepped inside. I was trapped. On the third day, I heard the stairs creaking. I was downstairs, and I knew no one else was in the house. But I heard it, footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from above. I looked up, and for a moment I saw something. A figure at the top of the stairs, a bare foot, disappearing into the darkness. My heart raced as I ran up the stairs, but when I reached the top, there was nothing. The air was cold, still, as if nothing had changed. But I knew something had. I started talking to her. I started apologizing. I told her I was sorry for everything I had done, for leaving her, for the things I had said. And it seemed like the house was listening. I could feel the air shift, like it was waiting for something. Then, one night she spoke. You came back. Her voice was low, almost a whisper, but it was unmistakable. I turned around, but there was nothing. The room was empty, just darkness. I stood there, frozen, trying to process what had just happened. It wasn't a threat, it wasn't anger. It was just a statement, a truth I couldn't deny. After that, she started appearing more often. Sometimes she'd be standing in the hallway, staring at me with empty eyes. Other times, she would sit beside me in bed, just watching, saying nothing, always silent, always cold. The first time she appeared next to me in bed, I froze. It wasn't fear that gripped me. It was shame. Her eyes, those eyes, were different now. They were hollow, dark. I couldn't look away from them. I begged her for forgiveness, but she didn't speak. She just reached out and touched my face, mulled and smooth like stone, but it was soft, like she had been alive once. The next morning, I woke up alone, but her touch was still on my face, faint but there, a redness that wouldn't go away. It was like a brand, a mark that I couldn't erase. I wondered if this was my punishment, if I was meant to stay in this house, living out my days in the presence of the woman I had abandoned. I began living in a routine as though I had been condemned to this place. I spoke to her even though she didn't answer. I left a chair pulled out at the table, like she might come back and sit down. I slept on the same side of the bed we used to share, waiting for something, for anything. I didn't know what I was waiting for, but I knew it wasn't over. It couldn't be. One night, I heard a crash. It came from the bedroom. I ran in to find one of our picture frames had fallen to the floor. The glass was shattered. The photo, our photo, taken on that beach trip, was there, but her face was gone, vanished, as if she had never been in the picture at all. The emptiness in the frame was more terrifying than I could have imagined. It felt like she was erasing herself, or worse, erasing me. I began to feel the weight of her absence, the absence of the love we once had. She was slipping away, and I was losing my grip on everything I had once known. I began to suspect that she wasn't just trying to get me to stay. She was preparing me for something, for a trade, an unspoken pact I had made when I walked out of that door all those years ago. On the seventh day, she spoke again. You know what I want. Her voice was emotionless, devoid of any warmth. It wasn't a request. It was a command, and I knew exactly what she meant. I had been avoiding it. I had been running from it. But there was no escaping it now. I went up to the attic. The room was dark, the air thick with dust and neglect. And there it was, an old rope tied to a beam. She stood below, watching me, her eyes dark and hollow, a slight nod, approval. I knew what she wanted. For a moment, I considered it. I thought about ending it all, about finally putting an end to the pain, but something stopped me. It wasn't fear. It was survival. It was instinct. And when I hesitated, she disappeared. The next day, I felt the walls closing in on me. The house was changing. The hallway, which had always been short, now seemed to stretch endlessly. The kitchen door creaked open on its own, even when locked. It was as if the house was adapting to its new reality, a prison made of guilt. And I was its prisoner. I tried to destroy the house. I set fire to the curtains and the furniture, but the flames wouldn't rise. They mocked me, flickering low and weak. The house wouldn't let me escape. It was as if she wouldn't let it happen. In a fit of rage, I screamed. I screamed everything I had kept inside for years. The truth, the guilt, that I loved her, but I couldn't keep the promises I made, that I had failed her. That night, she appeared one last time, standing at the foot of the bed, and for the first time she was crying, but she said nothing. She didn't need to. The next morning, everything changed. The front door was open. The light flooded in, and for the first time in years, it felt like the world was normal again. I walked out without looking back, but I knew she was still there, waiting for me to keep my promise. The first time I noticed something was wrong with the house behind mine. I was carrying a stack of their mail across our adjoining lawns. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows from the oak tree between our properties, and as I approached their back door, I realized with a sudden chill that there were no windows on this side of the house. Not a single one. The realization hit me like a physical blow. How had I lived here for over a year without noticing this? The weathered gray siding stretched uninterrupted from corner to corner, broken only by the single back door where I now stood hesitating, a bundle of envelopes in my trembling hands. I knocked 3 times, the sound hollow against the thick wood. As I waited, I studied the door's peculiar details, the tarnished brass knob that looked original to the house's 1920s construction, the faint scratches around the lock that suggested frequent use, and most disturbingly, the thin line of black residue along the bottom edge, as if smoke regularly seeped out from beneath it. The smell hit me next. Not the expected mustiness of an old home, but something far more unsettling. The cloying sweetness of rotting fruit, undercut with the sharp tang of burning metal. My stomach turned as I realized I'd smelled this before, in my own backyard when I'd discovered that damned well. The door creaked open before I could retreat. Mrs. Halcombe stood in the dim interior, her slight frame backlit by a single flickering bulb somewhere deep in the house. "You brought the mail," she observed, her voice carrying that same odd cadence I'd noticed during our first conversation. Each word perfectly enunciated, but somehow out of sync, like a record playing at the wrong speed. When she reached for the bundle, Her sleeve rode up to reveal a series of dark marks circling her wrist. Not bruises, but symbols, tattooed or perhaps carved into the skin. Before I could get a better look, she'd already withdrawn her arm, clutching the mail to her chest with surprising force. "Would you like to come in?" The question caught me off guard. Mrs. Halcombe had never invited me inside before. Through the narrow opening, I could see a sliver of the home's interior. Dark wood paneling, an ornate but dust-covered chandelier, and what appeared to be dozens of small, framed photographs covering every available wall space. Before I could answer, a sound from deep within the house made my decision for me. A low, rhythmic thumping that vibrated through the floorboards, accompanied by what might have been chanting. Mrs. Halcombe's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes darkened as she smoothly stepped back to block my view. "Perhaps another time," she amended, and closed the door with unsettling finality. Walking back across the lawn, my mind raced with questions. Why no windows? What was that smell? And those marks on her arm? I'd seen similar symbols somewhere before. It wasn't until I was back in my own kitchen pouring a much-needed drink that I remembered where. In my grandfather's old journal, the one I'd found in the attic when I first moved in. The memory sent me scrambling upstairs, nearly tripping over my own feet in my haste. The journal was right where I'd left it, buried under a stack of old blankets in the cedar chest. As I flipped through the brittle pages, my pulse quickened. There, on page 43, was a crude drawing of the same symbols, accompanied by my grandfather's shaky handwriting. "The old ones watch from below. The marks keep them sleeping." That night, I dreamed of the well for the first time. In the dream, I stood at its crumbling edge, staring down into absolute blackness. The smoke that normally rose from it was gone, replaced by something far worse, silence so complete it felt like pressure on my eardrums. Then, from the depths, came a sound I felt more than heard, a vast shuddering inhale as if the earth itself was drawing breath. I woke screaming, my sheets soaked with sweat, convinced for one terrible moment that the walls of my bedroom were breathing with me. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to the county records office. If I was going to understand what was happening, I needed answers about the history of these houses. What I discovered over the next 8 hours of frantic research chilled me to my core. The property record showed that my house and the Halcombes had been built simultaneously in 1923, along with 6 others on the block, all by the same construction company, all owned initially by members of the same extended family. My great-aunt's name appeared on the original deed, along with 7 others I recognized from family reunions. But the most disturbing discovery came when I pulled the original blueprints. The Halcombes house wasn't supposed to be windowless. The architectural plans clearly showed windows on all sides. Someone had sealed them shut. Armed with this new information, I made another attempt to speak with my neighbors that evening. As I approached their front door, I noticed for the first time how the porch light cast strange, elongated shadows from the house's angles, shadows that seemed to move independently when I wasn't looking directly at them. My knock went unanswered, but as I turned to leave, I spotted something that stopped me cold. Fresh dirt on the welcome mat, as if someone had recently walked in with muddy shoes, except the dirt wasn't brown. It was black, like the residue around my well. Against my better judgment, I tried the knob. It turned easily in my hand. The interior was darker than it should have been for early evening. All the lamps were off, and what little light filtered through the covered windows illuminated a scene straight from a nightmare. The walls weren't just covered in photographs. They were plastered with them, hundreds, if not thousands, arranged in spiraling patterns that made my head hurt to look at. As I stepped closer, my stomach lurched. Every single picture showed the same group of people, my family, the Halcombs, and others I recognized from around the neighborhood, standing in the same formation in different locations over what appeared to be decades. The oldest photos, yellowed with age, showed my great-grandparents as young adults, their faces grim as they stood around what looked like a freshly dug pit. In every subsequent image, the group grew slightly larger, their expressions more strained, until the most recent photos where their smiles looked less like joy and more like rictus grins of pain. A floorboard creaked upstairs, followed by the unmistakable sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor. I should have run then, but some terrible curiosity drove me forward, past the photographs, and toward the basement door I could just make out at the end of the hall. It stood slightly ajar, and from the crack came the same rhythmic thumping I'd heard before, now accompanied by a low guttural chanting in a language that made my teeth ache. As I reached for the doorknob, a hand clamped down on my shoulder with bruising force. "Don't," Mr. Halcombe whispered in my ear, his breath reeking of that same sweet rotten smell. "Not yet. The well isn't full enough." When I turned to face him, his eyes reflected the dim light like an animal's, and the symbols on his exposed forearms pulsed faintly, as if glowing from within. "Soon," he promised, steering me firmly back toward the front door. "When the stars are right. Your family has always known." I ran all the way home, locking every door and window behind me. That was 3 days ago. The Halcombs haven't left their house since. But every night, the smoke from the well grows thicker, coalescing into shapes that almost look like grasping hands. And last night, as I lay trembling in bed, I heard something new, a sound coming from the well that wasn't the usual hissing of smoke, but something far worse, something that sounded like a voice, whispering my name in perfect unison with the chanting from the Halcombs' basement. I don't sleep anymore. I sit by the back window, watching the well and the windowless house beyond, waiting for whatever comes next. Because Mr. Halcombe was right about one thing. My family has always known, and now so do I. If you've got a story like mine, something that's kept you up at night, something you can't explain, send it my way. I'm always looking for more creepy family secrets, haunted past tales, or unexplained deaths to share. Drop them at duskynightsword45mail.com, and I'll read every one. I put out new stuff every Monday to Friday, so hit that subscribe button if you want to keep up. Keeps the lights on and the stories coming. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time with more eerie encounters and psychological horror to dig into. Stay safe out there.